Hey, it's Yay for Yarn, and today I'm going to show you how to crochet the Cuddle cardigan. So this cardigan is very straightforward, very easy to make. It's basically a big rectangle with a little bit of edging put on the sleeves. So we're going to make a cardigan out of a rectangle, and as long as you can crochet a rectangle in a stitch pattern, then you can totally make this. So the first thing you're going to need for this project is the free written pattern, which you can get by clicking the first link in the description box down below, or you can purchase the large print ad-free printable PDF version of the pattern in my shop by clicking the second link in the description box down below. So this pattern comes in 3 different sizes because it is so oversized and it doesn't really fit close to the body. There are only 3 sizes here. Size 1 fits an extra small to a medium in women's sizes. Size 2 fits a large to a 2X, and size 3 fits a 3X to a 5X. So you're going to need some yarn, of course, and this is bulky weight yarn. This is a number 5 bulky weight yarn. This is Knit Picks Brava Bulky. It's an acrylic. It's very, very soft. And this is of course, a number 5 bulky. Do not try to substitute a different yarn unless you are willing to pretty much rewrite most of the pattern, because the gauge will greatly affect the finished size of the project. So don't try to substitute a different weight of yarn, but you'll want to use a yarn that is a number 5 bulky weight. And this is a very nice acrylic yarn that is very soft and relatively inexpensive. So I think this particular yarn is a really good choice. And of course you'll need a crochet hook. This is a US size L or 8mm crochet hook. And of course, if you need a different size crochet hook to get the correct gauge for the pattern, by all means, use whatever size crochet hook gives you the correct gauge with your personal tension. You'll also need a measuring tape, some yarn needles or tapestry needles for a little bit of seaming and weaving in ends, and some scissors. So now that we have all of our supplies, let's get started with the crochet. So we're going to start this project with a row of foundation single crochet. Now what this means is we're using the foundation single crochet to replace our foundation chain. And what this is going to do is it's going to give that foundation edge a much stretchier edge to it. It's going to be a lot stretchier, it's going to hang better, and this technique is not real difficult to work. And if you're not familiar with this particular method, I have an entire video in my channel that you can go and watch that shows in detail how to work this stitch. And I also have a free printable cheat sheet that you can get for the foundation stitches. Now, if you really want to use a foundation chain, then you can. I do include instructions for that in the pattern, but I highly recommend trying the foundation single crochet because it gives the fabric a much nicer edge and it does not inhibit the stretch of the rest of the fabric. So I'm going to go ahead and leave a tail about 1 yard long, and we'll use that for seaming. And then I'm going to chain 2. So I'm going to begin my row of foundation single crochet off of this chain 2, but first I'm going to get the tail out of the way. So I like to kind of roll up the tail anytime I'm leaving a long tail for seaming with later, and that just keeps it from getting tangled up with the yarn that's coming from the skein. So to work that foundation single crochet, for the first stitch, I'm going to insert my hook into the second chain, which is the very first one we made, but it's the second one from the hook. Yarn over, pull up a loop. Then we're going to yarn over, pull through 1 loop, which makes the chain, and yarn over, pull through 2 loops, which makes the single crochet. And this technique essentially makes the foundation chain and the first row of single crochet at the same time, but it just gives it a much neater edge with more stretch. So now that we've worked that first stitch, we're going to work all of the following stitches into the base of the previous stitch. So if we turn this piece over so that the bottom edge is facing up, we can see that there are two strands on the base of that stitch that look kind of like the top of a regular stitch. So there's a front strand and a back strand. I'm going to insert my hook into both of those. Yarn over, pull up a loop, yarn over, pull through one loop, and yarn over, pull through two loops. So now I'm going to do that again because we're now working into the base of the previous stitch. I'm going to turn it over so that the bottom edge is facing up, insert my hook into both strands of the base of that stitch, yarn over, pull up a loop, yarn over, pull through one loop, and yarn over, pull through two loops. And if you want more information about this, of course, there's an entire video showing how to do this technique. But I'm just going to continue working foundation single crochet until I have enough stitches in my row for the size that I'm making. So of course I'm making the size 1, which means I will need a total of 62 foundation single crochet for this first row. Alright, so I have the correct number of foundation single crochet for the size that I'm making. You can see how stretchy this is. And now we're going to move on to row 2. So for row 2, we're going to chain 2 and turn. I'm going to work a half double crochet in the same stitch that my chain is coming from, and in the next 7 stitches. And of course that will give us a total of 8 half double crochet. And I'm going to work a single crochet and a double crochet in the next stitch. So you can see what we just did. There's a single crochet and a double crochet worked into the same stitch. And now we're going to repeat a little sequence all the way across, and that is to skip one stitch, work a single crochet and a double crochet in the next stitch. So we're going to skip a stitch and work a single crochet and a double crochet in the next stitch, skip one stitch, work a single crochet and a double crochet in the next stitch. So I'm going to keep repeating this little sequence until I have 9 stitches left in my row. Alright, so I have 9 stitches left in my row. I'm going to skip one stitch, and I'm going to half double crochet in each of the next 8 stitches. Alright, so that is the end of row 2. Alright, so here is the piece after row 2. Now we're going to turn and work row 3. So we're going to chain 2 and turn. And what we're going to be doing is create a little bit of ribbing at the edges of our piece. So I'm going to work a ribbed half double crochet, which is also called half double crochet in the 3rd loop. And I have a whole video on that if you're not familiar with this stitch. It's just like a regular half double crochet, except instead of inserting into the top 2 strands of the stitch, there's a strand here, we're going to come to what is facing us as the front and insert the hook into this horizontal strand that runs across what is facing us as the front of the stitch, which leaves both loops of the top of the stitch unworked. So I'm working my half double crochet into that 3rd loop, which is what I'm calling a ribbing half double crochet. So yarn over, I'm not going to insert into either one of these top 2 loops. I'm going to come down here and insert into this horizontal strand. Yarn over, pull up a loop, yarn over, pull through all 3 loops on the hook. Again, we're not inserting into the top of the stitch, but in this horizontal strand that is running across what faces us as the front. So I've chained 2 and turned. I've worked a ribbed half double crochet in the same stitch that the chain is coming from, because the chain 2 does not count as a stitch. And then I'm going to work a ribbed half double crochet in the next 7. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7. That's a total of 8 ribbed half double crochets. And then just like in row 2, I'm going to work a single crochet and a double crochet in the next stitch. So our little sequence to repeat across this row is skip a stitch, work a single crochet and a double crochet in the next stitch, skip a stitch, work a single crochet and a double crochet in the next stitch, and etc. until we have 9 stitches left in the row. Alright, so there's 9 stitches left. I'm going to skip the first stitch and work a ribbed half double crochet into the next 8 stitches. Alright, so that's the end of row 3. And like I said, if you have any trouble with that ribbed half double crochet, I have an entire video showing how to do that stitch and how it works and all of that. So what we're going to be doing is we're going to be repeating row 3 until we have a certain number of rows finished for our piece so that we get the length that we need. So for the size that I'm making, which is the size 1, I am going to need to repeat row 3 80 more times to get to the length that we need for our panel. So I'm going to go ahead and repeat row 3 80 more times, and then I will show you what it looks like at that point. Alright, so I have finished my big rectangle up to this point. I have worked the correct number of rows so far for my size. And now we're going to finish off with the very last row, and for that last row we're going to chain 1 and work a single crochet in the same stitch and a single crochet in each stitch across. And this is just to mirror the foundation single crochet that we used to get started with our panel so that both edges match. So I'm just going to single crochet all the way across until we get to the end of the row. Alright, so there is my last stitch of the row. I'm going to leave a tail about 1 yard long for seaming, and then I'm going to cut the yarn, and I'm going to pull the yarn tail through the loop on my hook to tie off. So now if we kind of spread this out, you can see that we have a big rectangle, and it is pretty long. And the edges with the ribbing are the long edges, and then the short edges are the edges of the foundation edge and of course the top edge that we just finished. So now we are going to assemble the main part of this cardigan, but the first thing we need to do before we assemble anything is to block the sweater. So our cardigan is kind of going to go together like this, where that all the corners are folded in, and we're going to run some little seams here and here, and then leave a gap on each one of these to attach the rest of the sleeve. Now, before we do that, we're going to go ahead and block our big rectangle, and blocking will help even out the fabric and give the fabric a better drape and let it relax to, its most natural state. So because the yarn that I'm using is acrylic, I'm going to steam block my rectangle, but of course if you are using a yarn that is made of mostly natural fibers like wool or alpaca, then you might want to spray block or wet block your panel. Now if you're not familiar with blocking, I do have an entire video on that, which you can go and check out for more information. But I'm going to go ahead and steam block my big rectangle here, and then I will show you how we will put it together and add the sleeves. Alright, so now we are ready to assemble the main part of our cardigan, and then we're going to add a little bit of a sleeve to each side. So what I have here is my rectangle is sitting in front of me long ways, and it's a little bit too big to see it in the camera all at once. But here is the ribbed edge of my piece, and then the short edges, which do not have ribbing on them, are over here. And of course there's one on the other end as well. So what we're going to do is we're going to be seaming the short edges only. We're not going to do any seams that join these ribbed edges at all. We're only going to be stitching on the non-ribbed edges, or the short edges of our rectangle. So this corner of the rectangle down here has a long yarn tail coming off of it. I'm going to thread that yarn tail through my yarn needle. And what we're going to do is we're going to fold the corners of our rectangle in like this. So we're bringing the corners together at each short end. And I will kind of pull it over here on this side as well and do the same thing over here. So we're just going to pull the corners of the short edges of our rectangle together, and we want the corners to be touching like so. So it makes kind of like, what looks like the beginnings of a paper airplane on each end of our big rectangle. So this end has the yarn needle attached to the yarn tail already. So what we're going to do is we're going to start whip stitching these two sides of the short end together until we have a certain number of stitches left to work the rest of the sleeve. So I'm going to whip stitch starting at these two corners, And I'm just going to take one stitch through each stitch of the edge of the rectangle. And for the size that I'm making, which is the smallest size, the size 1, I'm going to stop when there are 18 stitches left along this short edge. So we're going to seam till we get to right around here, till there are 18 stitches left on the edge. Alright, so that is my last stitch. And as you can see here, I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18 stitches left for the opening. Now, what we're going to be making here is kind of like a long cuff, a long sleeve cuff. But this is where I need to stop according to the pattern instructions. So now what we're going to do is take one last stitch through the same stitch that we already worked into, wrap the yarn around the needle, and pull the needle through to make a knot. Now, of course, I have some extra tail yarn left, and that is fine. You can either trim it and weave it in now, or you can use it to stitch the sleeve cuff, but it doesn't really matter because even if you weave it in now, there will still be a tail left from the sleeve cuff that you can use to sew up the sleeve seam. So here is what our piece looks like at the moment. And what we're going to do is I'm going to go ahead and leave this tail hanging. I'm going to repeat this same seam on the other side with the other corners of the short end of my rectangle. So I'm going to do this other seam right here, and then I will show you how we're going to make the sleeve cuff. Alright, so now we're going to create our sleeve cuff, which is made of the same type of ribbing stitches as we used over here. And what we're going to do is we're going to take the yarn coming from the skein, and we're going to come over here to our sleeve opening. And right here at the base of our sleeve opening, we are going to join the yarn in the first stitch. And then we're going to just pull up a new loop, and we're going to chain 20. Alright, so now we're going to skip the first 2 chains and work a half double crochet in the 3rd chain from the hook. And then we're going to half double crochet in each of the 17 remaining chain stitches. Alright, so here's that last chain stitch right before we get to the edge of the sleeve opening here. And now what we're going to do is we're going to slip stitch in the next 2 stitches of the sleeve opening. So I'm going to slip stitch in this stitch, which is the one after the one that I joined in. Then we're going to slip stitch in a second stitch. So that is row 1 of our sleeve cuff. Now we're going to turn, and that 2 slip stitches right there that we just worked is kind of like our turning chain. It gets us up to the height we need for the next row. But at the same time, it's also joining our little panel that we're making to the sleeve cuff as we work around without having to work an extra seam. So I'm going to work a ribbed half double crochet in the next 18 stitches, which is only working into the stitches of the cuff and not into the stitches of the sleeve opening. Alright, so there is our last stitch. Of course, we are not going to work into that turning chain from the previous row because we're not counting that as a stitch. So that is the end of row 2. You can see we're getting the start of a little bit of a rectangle coming off of our sleeve opening. So for row 3, we're going to chain 2 and turn. We're going to work a ribbed half double crochet in the same stitch that the chains are coming from, and another ribbed half double crochet in each of the next 17 stitches. Alright, so here is the last stitch. And now what we're going to do is we are going to slip stitch into the next 2 stitches of the sleeve opening. So this one right here is where our previous row was joined to. So we're going to slip stitch in the next 2 unworked stitches of that sleeve opening. So now we're going to keep repeating rows 2 and 3 until we're pretty much making a rectangle that goes all the way around the sleeve opening, and we want that last row to be joined to the very last stitch of the sleeve opening down here. So we're just going to keep repeating rows 2 and 3, working those rows back and forth of the ribbed half double crochet and joining with slip stitches into the edge of the sleeve till we get all the way around the sleeve opening. And we don't want a gap, we just want a slit in between the very last row and the edge of the first row. So again, I'm going to ribbed half double crochet all the way across this row, then I'm going to chain 2, turn, and then ribbed half double crochet all the way back and slip stitch in the next 2 stitches. So I'm going to go ahead and do that, continuing around the sleeve opening, and then I'll show you what we're going to do next. Alright, so I have made it all the way around my sleeve opening here, and you can see we have kind of this little rectangle that is already attached to the sleeve opening. And if I turn this over a little bit, you can see that I have ended with row 2 so that my hook is at the edge of the sleeve cuff and not down here. And there is only a slit left on the sleeve cuff here because I don't have any more stitches from the opening that I could slip stitch into if I were to work another row. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to leave a bit of a tail, cut the yarn, and then I'm going to go ahead and tie off, and we're just going to stitch this slit closed right here and weave in both of the ends. So I'm going to use the yarn tail from where I tied off, and I should mention here that on the other side of the work, because if you're familiar with this ribbing stitch, if you've watched my video on that, some rows make the columns of ribbing on this side, and the other rows in between make the columns of ribbing on the other side. So the top of this row would normally make the column of ribbing on the other side. Now, if I were to have it going the other way around, so let's say that it ended up more like this, where the top of my last row would have been another column of ribbing, then in that case I would make my seam with a back and forth stitch like this, so that I was not whip stitching over the tops of those stitches. That would keep the stitches still being able to face up like that and make that column of ribbing. But since my piece does not have the last row facing out as far as the top edge of the last row, to create that column of ribbing, I'm just going to whip stitch them together. So just as we whip stitched the seam for the sleeve, we're just whip stitching all of these stitches from the chain edge, the foundation chain edge, to the top row. Alright, so I'm down to the last couple of stitches. So I'm just going to carefully stitch those last few stitches together. And now I can go ahead and take a stitch down here, because if you can see, here's my yarn tail. I'm going to grab a strand of yarn from the sleeve opening right next to where my last row was joined, and I'm just going to wrap the yarn around the needle and make a knot. Pull that tight to secure. And then I'm going to weave in both of these tails, and I'm also going to take the yarn tail from the beginning of our sleeve cuff. Because I did not make any kind of joining knot when I attached my new yarn, I just pulled up a new loop, I need to make a knot now. So I'm going to grab a little bit of yarn right there and wrap the yarn around the needle, and then pull that yarn tail through to make a knot, and then I can just weave in both of these tails. So now that I have my second sleeve cuff made and attached, then my sweater is complete. And because it's made from a big rectangle, it has a very oversized kind of slouchy feel to it. And you can see here are the sleeves. And then up here is the top of the cardigan with the ribbing around the edges. And then of course the ribbing goes down both fronts and also edges the bottom. And because we used a nice soft bulky yarn, the fabric of this cardigan has a very soft, squishy, cozy feel to it. So I hope you've enjoyed this video. If you liked it, please give it a thumbs up. If you make this project, let me know how it turns out for you in the comments below. And don't forget to subscribe, making sure you click the little bell next to the subscribe button to be notified of new videos. Thanks for watching.